Nanny or nursery? Which is right for me? Hello and welcome back to All Things Nanny, the go-to podcast for parents and nannies navigating the world of childcare employment, brought to you by Nannytax. I'm your host, Helen Phillips, and today we're tackling one of the biggest questions new parents face. Nannies or nurseries? Which is right for your family? There's no one-size-fits-all answer, but understanding the pros, cons and practical differences between these two childcare routes can make your decision a whole lot easier. Joining me today are Sally Britton, Managing Director of Snapcare, an SEN recruitment agency who specialise in matching families with the right childcare support, and Jo Williams, a Nannytax ambassador, professional nanny and qualified nursery practitioner with almost a decade of experience in early years education. Thank you both so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you.
Great. So let's start with our first topic. So day to day, what it's really like. Sally, can you walk us through what a typical day looks like for a child in a nanny's care?
Yes, of course. So, of course, it will vary depending on the child's age and any particular needs that they have. Going through the day will be a structured day, but with flexibility built in. And of course, the child needs to have all areas of their development attended to, and the nanny will make sure that she or he, of course, if it's a nanny, will look at all the different activities that need to be structured and built into the day. And that will include, of course, some social activities. So they're going out and meeting other children and other nannies and parents as well, but also physical activities. The routine can be, it can be a very long day. So a nanny will need to, in communication with the parents, decide and agree what that routine is going to look like. And of course, every parent will want something different for their child. And so it's a real collaboration with the parents to make sure that the daily routine meets the needs of that child.
Oh, that's brilliant. So it's like a conversation that might happen prior to the nanny taking on the role.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So when we're recruiting, that is one of the first things that we're talking about to the parents, because every parent will have a different parenting style and they will want to bring in a nanny who has a similar attitude or is happy to work in that parenting kind of style. And of course, if a parent employs a nanny, they're not going to have 100% control about what that day looks like. And that isn't necessarily the right thing anyway, because a nanny will bring her own ideas or his own ideas into the day and what they can bring to the child in a creative way.
That's nice. It's like a collaboration of ideas.
Absolutely.
That sounds amazing.
And it has to be, because a parent, employs a nanny because they want to have that very bespoke childcare. By having a nanny, that is possible, because then you're talking it through and saying, okay, this is how I like things to be. And then the nanny will then say, okay, that's great. I understand that. And I absolutely appreciate that. That's what I will do. I'd also like to try and bring in this, or do this. And sometimes, of course, that's some way down the line when everybody has got to know each other and understands how it works. And of course, things will change. Children will change in terms of their needs, of course.
Of course. Amazing. And Jo, how would you say that compares to a typical day in a nursery?
It's kind of similar in a way, but I would say that a nursery day is a lot more structured and a lot more routine-based. Don't get me wrong, like nannying is like that, but I think it's more sticking by the times with nurseries. Where I used to work, they'd open their doors at 7:30 and finish at 6:30. Again, similar hours to maybe what a nanny might work. That's what I work currently as well. They'll come through the doors and they'll sit down and have breakfast right away, and then followed by either a structured activity or like a child-led activity, followed by snack, and then maybe a bit of outdoor time, and then lunch, and then so on and so forth. So every sort of step through the day is sort of at a particular time.
I guess they have to factor in the other classes and things. So there's maybe a bit less flexibility in terms of each specific child. And
and I'd say with being in a nursery as well, there's maybe like less freedom as maybe, being a nanny. But again, it does depend on the parents and how much, flexibility and freedom they give you as a nanny as well.
And as someone, you were saying to me earlier that you work with a family at the moment as a nanny, but obviously you've worked in a nursery before.
Yes, that's right.
as someone that's worked in both settings,
yes,
which I think you both have as well, but what are the benefits of one versus the other?
I think with nurseries, obviously there's more than one child. So you could, one child could be in a room with, say, 10 other children. So I think it's good for socialisation. And maybe for children that aren't so confident, it will bring their confidence up to a level where they want to play with other children.
Right.
And social skills is definitely one which is a real good thing for nurseries.
And something which the children would enjoy as well, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and they'll often do a lot of group things together. With nannying, I think it is what you make it. So when I first started nannying, I guess I was slightly isolated and I didn't know any other nannies. But it's when you start joining music classes or other groups, like play groups, or meeting nannies at schools and things, then that's when you can meet up with other nannies and have play dates, and then your nanny children can make friends with their nanny children, and so on and so forth.
So then they don't miss out on the socialisation that you were saying.
Exactly.
And that's what Sally was saying as well about, I suppose, you get that network and you open that up. And would you agree with?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that it's with a nanny, they have to make sure that happens because obviously, as you say, in a nursery, it's just there. So the children will be interacting all the time with other children, whereas a nanny will have to orchestrate that. They'll have to manage that and make sure that happens on a daily basis, because you don't want to have a child who's just at home with one adult. And with the nannies that we place, it is slightly different because they're working with children with additional needs or disabilities. But the principle is the same in terms of needing to make sure that the day is structured in a way that they are exposed to all those different elements, just as they would if they were in a nursery sort of setting.
So there's opportunities to get the best of both worlds.
Yes,
amazing.
Definitely.
So, Jo, you mentioned child-led activities.
Yes.
Could you tell us a bit more about what that means?
Yeah, so as opposed to staff or parent or adult-led activities, it's basically the child deciding what activity they would like to do next, rather than an adult would plan an activity and present it for them. So it's structured.
Yeah.
Whereas a child has more, they have more choice in maybe what they would want to do. I've not had much experience with Montessori nurseries, but I think a lot of the aim for a Montessori nursery is for the children to have a more child-led approach with things they do during the day.
That sounds amazing. I guess that would be something that they would enjoy as well, having that autonomy to choose what to do next.
Yes, yeah.
So what would you say that a child would enjoy most about each environment that we were speaking about, nurseries or nannies?
Well, like I said before, I think with nurseries, it's that group environment. It's being around your peers and, learning social skills and building your confidence, but also your independence at the same time. I think it's a good preparation for school, because they are being learnt to be left without their parents and getting used to other adults, because obviously when they start school, they will be left with their teachers and other children. So yeah, I think it's them getting used to being around other people and the whole group dynamic. Yeah, definitely.
That makes sense. And Sally, what would you say that children most enjoy about the nanny setting?
I think a nanny will be a very consistent person in their lives, especially if the parents are working parents. The nanny might actually spend more daytime hours with the child than the parents do. So they will become a trusted adult and somebody who will give them that one-to-one attention and support, which I think most children would enjoy. And obviously their day can be sort of tailored to what their needs are. And I think also there is that element that there can be spontaneity. So if something sort of happens that you say, oh great, well actually, the sun has now come out, so we can all go out on a nice day's activity. There is the ability to have that kind of flexibility that you can do that. So whereas, obviously in a nursery, you couldn't possibly have that with all of the children
Slightly
and go, right, let's just suddenly decide to do something. Whereas obviously a nanny can do that. They can have that flexibility to be a bit more sort of spontaneous even.
Brilliant. So let's talk about the practical stuff. Time, money and flexibility. We've touched on flexibility a little bit, but how do the costs of nannies and nurseries compare? And what are the parents really paying for in each case?
I would say that obviously, I mean, it's going to be obvious that a nanny is not going to be less expensive than a nursery, because it's a one-to-one support that is being provided. With the rates for a nanny, there are market rates, of course, and for many, many years, I mean, I've been in this industry with SNAP since 2001, and the wages for nannies were very consistent, and they would increase most years a little bit, but then it was, some years they wouldn't even increase. But then from Brexit and from COVID, wages absolutely skyrocketed. I mean, it was just unheard of. In the 20 years that I'd been working, wages absolutely skyrocketed for nannies and obviously in a lot of other industries as well, because there was a shortage of nannies. That has now thankfully levelled off, but it was definitely a consideration for a lot of people that they were going, actually, this is now very expensive to have a nanny. And I think that's where people were then more looking at maybe part-time kind of nannies. So they were going to look at actually addressing that, because they still wanted to have that one-to-one, but they looked at that. When you're looking at a child with an additional need or a disability, we're very much in line with a mainstream nanny wage. So people might think that actually it would be a lot more, because obviously it is a different type of role. But we've always tried to maintain that as a similar kind of level. And fortunately for us, the people that we work with, that isn't their main kind of objective. They're looking at something different in terms of supporting a child with a disability or additional need. So we're able to maintain that and keep that the similar kind of level. But for sure, it's going to be a more expensive option than a nursery.
Absolutely. And what would you say that parents should understand with the cost of specialised one-to-one care?
As a nanny, in a nannying kind of role, it is pretty similar to a mainstream kind of nanny wage, except if there's very complex needs. So we sometimes work with children who maybe have more almost medical kind of type needs, and it's almost like a nursing role. We don't place nurses, but they're doing peg feeding and epilepsy management, really quite high level kind of complex medical support. And in that case, then they would need to be looking at adding on a higher kind of rate. If it's a trauma, of course, as well, if it's that kind of, if somebody has to have that very specific experience of working with a child who has trauma in their background.
Absolutely. And that's a real training, isn't it? And a real skill.
Yes. You can't just put anybody into those kind of, and people understand that, because it is, as I say, if you're working, with maybe a child who's on the autistic spectrum, it is more. Everything about SEN and disability is more. But it's not out of the realms of what a mainstream nanny would do. It's just being mindful of certain kind of things. So it's on the similar kind of level.
Jo, what funding options are available for help with nursery fees? And is the same financial support available to families with nannies as well?
Yes, so there is funding that parents can get for their children in nursery. It is different if you were a nanny, though, but I'll go into that shortly. So at the moment, children of the age of 3 and 4 can get 30 hours free funding a week. And that can be, spread over the week, and they don't have to necessarily be full-time in nursery. For example, the little boy I look after at the moment, who's 4 years old, he just does his 30 hours and he doesn't do any more than that, because if he was to do any more than that during the week, then his parents would have to pay on top of that.
Right.
And he'll start school in September. But I believe that the UK government are extending that from September. So children from the age of 9 months old can also be included in that 30-hour free funding as well.
Amazing. That's great to have that support from 9 months.
Yes, definitely. And I think leading on to nannies, so they don't get the funding like nurseries offer. For families with Ofsted registered nannies, they can get tax-free childcare, and for every £8 that you pay into your tax-free account, the government will top it up with an extra £2, and it's a cap of £2,000 per child per year. But the household can't earn more than £100,000 per year. It has to be less than that.
Okay, thank you so much. One of the biggest benefits of having a nanny that is often talked about is the flexibility a nanny provides for parents. Jo, how much flexibility do nurseries typically offer for things like early drop-offs, late pickups, or short notice changes?
Well, in my experience, not as much as a nanny. I think, again, that's the luxury of having a nanny because, again, in my experience as a nanny, there'll be times where the parents' train will be delayed and they'll be late home by, say, 20 minutes. But to me, that's fine, and that's just how it is and these things happen. Whereas at a nursery, it depends on the nursery.
Sure.
But often they will give you a little bit of leeway. I'd say particularly more on the early pickups. Because there are pretty, I'd say, strict timings with when they open in the morning. Parents just have to be a bit more considerate of the staff because you're not just letting one person stay behind. There's quite a few members of staff who would have to stay behind in order for them to pick up their child later. But again, like I said, their train might be delayed. There might be things out of their control. These things do happen.
Of course, yeah. And like you said, I didn't realise that obviously it would have to be more than one person that stays behind. So that impacts quite a few people in that instance.
And they might incur a little charge as well if they are late by however much. If it's just a minute or so, that they usually would let that slide. But if it is later than that, then they probably will incur a charge.
Is it sort of quite hefty or?
I think in my experience, it was, I want to say like, this might be wrong, but like £1 a minute.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I think something like that.
So that can really add up.
Yeah.
And you briefly touched on it, but how does that compare to nannies?
There's a lot more flexibility with having a nanny because rather than being in a setting, you are in their home. So, if the parent is late, they just have to get on with it kind of thing. I mean, I wouldn't opt to be early for work if I'm a nanny. Yeah. But there are times in the morning where like nannies might be late to work because of, I have to go on the M40 every day to get to my place of work. So often there's traffic and, you're at a standstill. I'd say a lot more leeway with having a nanny than in a nursery setting for sure.
Yeah. So moving on now to child development, one of the biggest concerns parents will have is, will my child be learning and growing? Jo, nurseries often follow structured early years framework. How does this support child development?
Yes, in a nursery setting, like you say, they will follow an early years framework, often called the EYFS, if you want to be a bit fancy. And there are 7 key areas to that, 3 prime areas and also 4 specific areas as well. And they will focus on the communication and language development of a child, also their physical development and their personal, social and emotional development as well. Most staff members within a nursery would be called a key worker, and they will have their own key children to kind of like monitor and track their development. I remember when I was in a nursery, we used to have an app called Tapestry, which we would log all of the children's developmental skills. We'd also take photos as well, and the parents could also log on to this to track their children's day and what they've been up to. Often as well, this may seem surprising, but nurseries are also offer parents' evenings as well. I know that mine did when I worked there. Not all parents would want to at this stage. They might think it's a bit too early. But if they are particularly, concerned about their child's development and how they're getting on, then it's good for them to talk one-on-one with the key worker.
Yeah, I guess it's nice to have that communication channel open so that you know what's going on. Yes. It's great to have the updates, but I suppose to actually be able to have a conversation with the person that's predominantly looking after your child in the day.
Yes, exactly.
This must be really valuable for the parent.
For sure. And often the key workers, if the staffing allows it, will try and do more specific activities for particular children to tailor it to their needs.
Sally, how do nannies encourage learning and development in a home-based setting?
So nannies have the ability, of course, to give very bespoke support to the child. So they can in conjunction with communicating with the parents, they can focus on very specific areas if necessary, and of course make sure that all of the kind of areas of development are being addressed. And I think that's one of the key sort of things, benefits of having a nanny, is that they can do that, and they can also look at the child's learning style. So, some children will be more visual learners, others not, but they can be very, very bespoke about, all areas of development because they have that one-to-one.
So they can really tailor it into that specific child's needs as well.
And it could be that the parents are the parents are the parents, so they're going to know their child very well. And they're going to be the people who sort of say, okay, well, look, actually, I'm a little bit concerned about this, or, we're wondering if actually should my child be at this stage now? And the nanny will know the developmental stages of the child, of where they should be with their milestones. And they can talk it through in terms of any focus that the parents want the nanny to really kind of look at.
So they almost get their parents' evening as well, but in a sort of slightly different setting.
Yes. And I think also, in the same way, the nanny will give feedback every day. So every family and nanny will do it in a different kind of way. But there should always be that daily sort of feedback. Okay, this is what's happened today. These are some areas that, I just wanted to bring to your attention, or whatever. Or this is, he did great here, and he excelled here and achieved this. But to keep up to date. And I think that with all of these things, it's the same in the nurseries, communication is just key, because, if the parents are working, they're not seeing all of those things, whereas the nanny will see it, and he or she will see how the child is in different settings as well. So, out in the community or at home or whatever it might be, the nanny will be able to give very good feedback. And also keep a log of that, so a daily log. Nearly all nannies will keep a daily log of what sort of happened, just an overview, so that you can also see the kind of progress of the child.
And I'd say that's definitely the same case in nurseries as well. I know when I worked there, every child would have their own diary. And throughout the day, we would be filling it out and logging everything that's been happening through the day. So how much they've eaten, what they've eaten, what activities they've been doing, if they're that bit younger, nappies and sleep time and things like that. And then it's, like you say, giving the feedback at the end of the day, so the parents are completely in the loop with everything.
Of course. Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so we've touched on this briefly, but let's talk about emotional well-being, because as we know, that's just as important as education. How would you both say the caregiver-child bond develops in a nanny setting versus a nursery setting?
I think for a nanny, it's, as I said before, the nanny is likely to spend more time during the day with the child than the parents do. And I think it's about the nanny must realise what a key role that they play, but that it is a job, and that sometime they will leave. Of course, most nannies, and I count myself in that, many, many years ago I was a nanny, and I'm still in touch with the families that I worked on. I'm talking many years ago. And, they will stay in touch, but they won't be that key person in their life forever. A lot of nannies stay many years, and I'm glad to say a lot of our nannies stay many years. It's not about creating a dependence on the nanny. It's about having somebody who is there, who is a secure base for them, who can build their confidence, who they know that they can trust, and all of those sorts of things. But it's not having that over-dependence. And it's always about understanding that actually it is the parents. The parents are the parents. They're not the parents, they're the child carer. And it's about making sure that everything that the parents do is supported by the nanny, and so that the child knows that actually it is the parents who are their key person, and the nanny is there to support them when the parents are not there.
Jo, how about in a nursery setting?
Yeah, I think, like you say about the dependency, I think in a nursery, there tends to be more people kind of coming and going a little bit, and there are generally more people surrounding that child. But like I said before, the child will have that key worker, and that key worker would spend more time with that particular child. Comparing it to being a nannying, you have that one-on-one time pretty much throughout the whole day, whereas at a nursery, it's not quite like that. The child won't always be with their key worker. They might be with a different staff member, and playing with a group of children. It's similar but different.
Okay, so if we now turn to additional needs, how well does each setting support children who need a bit more help? Sally, what makes an SEN trained nanny different, and how do they support children with complex needs?
So obviously I'm biased because this is my field. And I think that fundamentally an SEN nanny and a mainstream nanny have the fundamental same qualities. And the main quality is that you have to love being around children all day, every day. That's absolutely. And you have to express that. You have to express and show your enthusiasm and commitment for that type of work. And I would say the difference then when we have an SEN nanny or a specialist nanny is that it's more. So you have to be more patient. You have to be more enthusiastic. You have to be more emotionally robust. Everything has to be more because the job is more. And of course, they'll need more skills. So some of the children, well, all of the children that we work with and support will have very specific areas of need. And whether that's because they are neurodivergent, whether they have complex medical needs, whether they have mental health needs. There are so many different variables, but those skills are what then bring the outcome that everybody is looking for, which is to help that child reach their potential, whatever that potential may be.
Brilliant. Thank you. Jo, how do nurseries typically accommodate children with SEN?
So I think nurseries, they need to be inclusive. I think that's the main thing. And they need to cater to every child's need. Depending on the child, they need to provide tailored support plans, potentially, get specialists and other professionals involved, but always keeping the parents in the loop.
Are there any circumstances where nurseries maybe can't accommodate the needs of specific children?
I'd say so, yes, particularly with staff. So a lot of staff will have training in certain areas, but not all staff would be maybe comfortable or confident to be looking after children with particular needs. And also in terms of ratios as well, I think it's harder in a nursery to have that one-on-one time. Although, like I said before, every nursery should have a special SEN officer in place, so they could be spending more time with that child. But I think it's harder to accommodate more children with particular needs compared to, if you were to have an SEN nanny, for example.
Yes, I mean, we have had an experience of families who have a child with quite complex needs, and a nursery simply wasn't able to accommodate that child. And it wasn't because they were being, mean or nasty or anything, but it was just that their physical needs were very great, and it just wasn't going to be viable for the nursery to be able to do that. Whereas if somebody has an SEN nanny, obviously they're in their own home environment, they have all the equipment there, everything is set up for that child. And of course, it isn't just about about physical needs, it's also about maybe behavioural needs. So if a child has, very extreme kind of behavioural needs, not every nursery is going to be set up to be able to accommodate that. And I think, as you said before, it will vary from nursery to nursery.
Yes, exactly.
And some nurseries are much more focused on being an inclusive nursery, rather than just saying, yes, we are inclusive, but actually being very proactive about that. But they set that up from the beginning. So they make sure it is accessible. So there aren't any sort of stairs and things like that. But I think it's unrealistic to expect a nursery that hasn't set up like that to then, be able to accommodate all of the needs for all children.
Okay, finally, let's help parents pull it all together. What are the main factors families should consider when choosing between a nanny and a nursery?
As we've heard, there are pros and cons with each of those choices, and it will be a very personal choice that is right for each family. If people are looking for really bespoke support that they can have most control over, I think that's probably the key thing with a nanny, is that you can basically say, this is how I want my child to be treated every day. This is what I want them to do. This is the activities I want them to do. This is how I want you to be. Really quite down to a quite granular kind of level. I've certainly had, parents that have come to me who have sort of said, my son was in a nursery and it was fine, but he's on the autistic spectrum. He found it overwhelming. It was overstimulating for him. And I knew that I needed to go a different route. And so I thought, do nannies, would a nanny look after my child because he, does have additional needs? And of course, the answer is yes. And so she came to us to sort of say, okay, would you be able to? And you say, absolutely, this is what we do. This is, this is every day. These are the placements that we make. And so she was able to then sort of say, okay, now with my son, he finds this very, very difficult. If there are loud noises, if there is this, there is this. She was able to be very, very specific about his needs. And then, of course, we were able to then put that into a job description. We then interviewed the applicants and sort of say, okay, this is what this family needs. They need somebody who has this skill, who can focus on this and can bring this for this particular child. So it's completely bespoke and they have the most control. And I would say that is probably the biggest thing, is if that they want to have the biggest influence on how their child's day is.
And did you get any feedback from that family to know how the child got on?
Oh yes. I mean, we keep in contact with the people that we place, and he thrived. He absolutely thrived because he was comfortable, because he was in his own home. He had all of his things around him, his toys, everything that he liked to do. But most importantly, or as importantly, the nanny knew everything, any triggers that he might have, all of those kind of things, because she was prepared. She knew all of those sorts of things. So then their day was based around the things that he found, that he enjoyed and everything. He found transitions very difficult at the nursery. So he would, they would have to sort of move from one activity to another. Whereas with the nanny, of course, she was able to plan that. And it was like they had a visual timetable. And so it's like, right, first of all, we're going to be doing this. Then we'll be moving on to do this. And he would go and take the little picture down and sort of say, right, we've done that. I know that's next. So his stress levels went down massively, which then opened up all sorts of things. So his learning then really developed because he wasn't so stressed about all these different things. He knew what was happening, and they were able to build a very structured day that suited him.
That's incredible. Must have really made a difference for the child and the family as well.
Yes, and the nanny.
Yeah, of course.
And the nanny, because that's what the nanny is doing this for.
Yeah.
A nanny is going into this to make a difference, and they can make a huge difference.
Amazing. Thank you. Jo, are there certain types of personalities that thrive more in one environment than another, you would say?
Well, I think with nurseries, I think parents have to remember that compared to having a nanny, it's, I'd say, a very structured routine day, and everything is sort of stuck by times. The children will be in a big group setting. So particular children who are maybe more sensitive to noise or are lacking in confidence, they might struggle a little bit. But I also think it will help them, especially when starting school. It will prepare them for school. Yeah, a lot of fun, but being in group settings.
Sally, what are the signs that a parent's current childcare choice might not be the right fit, and what should they do about it?
So I suppose it falls into two different areas. It's either not working for the child or it's not working for the family. And that probably means it's not working for either of them. But it could be that the child is maybe stressed and is not thriving and not getting that kind of enough one-to-one sort of support or whatever it may be. But it may be that the child is just that's not the right environment for the child. Or for the parent, it might be a practical kind of reason. So with a nanny, as we talked about before, you can have that great flexibility. Supposing you're a working parent and you have to leave the house at sort of 7:30 or 7 o'clock or whatever in the morning. If you're having to sort of take your child to a nursery at a specific time, it's very stressful. Whereas if you have a nanny, and especially if you have a live-in nanny, the flexibility that gives you is huge because the person is there. So, you've got that sort of thing. So I think it's about when a parent feels the sort of stress of it, whether it's a practical stress because they're always racing to try and get somewhere or get back in time or whatever it might be, or that their child isn't really achieving the progression that they would anticipate. And of course, what to do about that is obviously to take a bit of a step back and go, okay, really, what are the issues here? What am I really struggling with here? What could we change here? Okay, does it need to be a different environment? Actually, would a nursery be better, or would an SEN nanny be better? Of course, if it was an SEN nanny, we'd like them to contact SNAP and we will be able to help them. But of course, there are lots of great nurseries as well who, that can, accommodate children and do a fantastic job. So I think it's about taking a step back and going, really, what are the difficulties that I'm experiencing, and which kind of option is going to be a better option for me to get over those.
And of course, it does, encapsulate cost as well. That is a huge factor for considering a nanny or a nursery. But I guess, as we've touched upon before, with the nursery, you can get the funding for 3 and 4 year olds, soon to be younger than that. So that, I think, will entice a lot more parents. Whereas nannies don't quite get the funding. They have, other things, but it's a bit different.
Yeah.
And what about if a family is unsure? Is it possible, or is it helpful to maybe combine the two?
You can do. I mean, in my experience, the children I look after now, I'm obviously their nanny, but one of the children goes to nursery, but they have the 30-hour free funding. So they have a bit of both. And I think he has really benefited from being at a nursery setting, because he used to be quite independent and play on his own a lot. But now he'll be passionate about talking about his friends and, the people he's played with. And, I want to have a play date with this person at this weekend. So I think having both is actually quite beneficial for him, because I am that constant person that's always there. And, he knows that I'll be dropping him off at nursery and picking him up and doing other activities with him. But in his nursery setting, it's being with the other children, it's expressing his feelings and, making friends.
Brilliant. So he gets the best of both worlds.
Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant.
So I think that the situation where you're in, where you're a full-time nanny and your child goes to nursery, I think that's the ideal option in terms of combining nursery and nanny. What I would say is that if you're going to be combining the two, what you don't want to do is have a part-time nanny and fit that in with a nursery if possible. I know there's always costing implications to that. Finding a part-time nanny, a great part-time nanny, is much more difficult than finding a full-time nanny. And in this situation where you have your 30 hours free nursery, then you can have the both of them, and you do then genuinely get the best of both worlds.
So if we're not having a part-time nanny, but we've got a full-time nanny and the child's in nursery, what would the nanny be doing in the day when the child's at nursery?
So I have an experience of this.
Great.
So one of the children I used to look after would, 2 of the children would be at school all day, and then the youngest would be at preschool for like a good section of the day, usually at the whole morning. That leaves the question, what am I doing in that time? Which is usually general housekeeping. I'll often use that time to, plan and prepare meal times, so lunches, dinners, often batch cook things as well. Many nanny families will have cleaners, but many nanny families would expect the nanny to do some general housekeeping. So that's doing the children's laundry, just keeping everything tidy, sorting of maybe the children's bedrooms or their toys, that kind of thing, running some errands as well. You kind of sometimes become a bit of a PA, not just a nanny. Yeah. That was my experience anyway.
I think people are being more creative because they have to be. Because if you want to have a full-time nanny, which is, a great nanny is nearly always going to be looking for a full-time job. So people are being much more creative. And we're having parents come to us and saying, okay, look, these are the hours that I need, but it's really only before and after school. is it okay if I ask somebody, could this be a job that I ask somebody to do, for example, supporting me in my office, or lots of different kind of variations. And we've had all sorts of different kind of jobs. We've had people that have helped out in stables, in horses' stables.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say walking the dog's another one I used to do.
But completely sort of outside of actually the kind of the nannying. And actually, nannies like it because it's a really nice kind of variety, and they're learning sort of, different kind of skills, whether it's working in an office or whatever it might be. But we're certainly seeing more of that because I think people are realising that actually getting a before and after school nanny is very difficult. It's not impossible, but it is difficult because you can imagine if you were the nanny and you're looking at the jobs, you're going, okay, do I want this job where I go to work and then I come back? And then I go to work and then I come back. It's not as appealing as a job where it's a full-time kind of role. So I think people are being more creative, and I think that's a great thing because, as I say, I think it adds in a different element for the nanny as well. And what you don't want to be is you don't want to be a parent who is like, okay, well, I'm paying this nanny, so I'm going to make sure that they've got some work to do, and really you're finding work for them to do. It's not a great situation. The nanny is not going to feel great about that because you're just filling the hours really. So we always encourage people to be creative. Okay, what else could this person help you with? They're not just a nanny, they're a person who's got, good skills. And so, we've seen a lot of very different things, which I think is great. And
that's awesome.
To be encouraged.
Yeah. Hybrid nanny.
Absolutely.
That wraps up this episode of All Things Nanny. A huge thank you to our guest for sharing such clear and practical insight. If you're a parent weighing up the decision between a nanny and a nursery, hopefully this episode has helped make that path a little clearer. Remember, there's no right choice. The best childcare is the one that meets your child's needs, fits your family's lifestyle, and gives you peace of mind. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe, share it with other parents, and leave us a review. I'm Helen Phillips, and this has been All Things Nanny. Thanks for listening.